everyone, I'm Daniela Bunoaica, a Romanian translator and small agency owner based in Southwest England. Thank you for stopping by. This is a translation podcast where I invite fellow translators, interpreters, and also connected professionals to talk about their work, challenges, and share meaningful insights. Today we're recording the 7th episode, and it is my absolute pleasure to present you Keith Wagner. Keith is a freelance translator and PhD student in comparative literature based in Austin, Texas. His working languages are English, French, Italian, and Romanian. He's originally from Aurora, Colorado, and holds a certificate in translation and interpretation, a bachelor's in modern languages, and a master in French studies. He has also worked extensively as a language instructor and in various roles in the localization industry. In 2023, he was awarded a Fulbright grant, which allowed him to dedicate 9 months to research in Bucharest, Romania. Keith conducts literary research on multilingual writers with a particular and interesting focus on the 19th and 20th century Francophone Romanian writers. He does not currently work as an interpreter, but never say never. The passion persists. Welcome, Keith.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's so great to talk with you and to join the group of guests who you've already had. I've loved to listen to this, or I've loved listening to this podcast as well.
Amazing. It's great to have you. And before we deep dive into different topics, I wanted to ask, you've studied multiple languages, French, Italian, Romanian, and you have such a rich work and research background. What first sparked your love for languages? And did you always know you'd end up studying languages?
Yeah, so I didn't know per se that I would end up studying languages. No one in my family spoke another language, so we were, in some ways stereotypical American monolingual English-speaking family. So I didn't have that presence or that awareness of other languages at first, but I think what came to my awareness and sparked my curiosity at first was to listen to all people's different accents speaking English. And I think I had more of a curiosity for linguistics before I even knew that was a word or a field of study or anything. So I would just have this curiosity because of the way someone spoke English, told about a story of a different place, of perhaps a different language, a different life. And so that just really interested me. And I think that's evolved now looking at my research focus as well. I was just really interested in the profile of a multilingual person. So who is this person that's a second language or a non-native language speaker? And so I was in the observer role at first, really curious about other people. But then I think as I got to maybe early teens, maybe a little earlier than that, I wanted to be the person who is speaking other languages. So I wanted to make myself the laboratory, my own brain. So I started out with studying French and always had the presence of Spanish in the environment. I grew up in Colorado. I live now in Texas. They're both in the American Southwest. So I think English and Spanish cohabitate very naturally here. And so I was always curious listening to that and seeing that there was as I learned more French in the classroom, I would be in, say, work environments or other situations outside of it in my teens where I was aware there was this whole world happening, or a whole, world of ideas being exchanged or jokes happening or something like that in Spanish. And I was just really curious about it. And so, it was this dual passion of what it is to be a person that speaks multiple languages. And then also this curiosity for connection with people and to see, what was happening outside of the English space of discourse, if you will, to sound very pedantic about it. And I was able to take my first trip out of the US when I was 17, and I went to Lyon in France, and was able to really live in the language. And that just sparked a whole new curiosity from there. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. I was just about to ask you what are people's favorite languages in Colorado or in Texas to learn, if it's only French and Spanish or maybe some others in the mix nowadays. What's popular?
Yeah, I think French and Spanish are more available earlier on in school, but I think that like in the universities, to when people have access to other languages, I think it's some things are getting more popular. I think, Arabic, it probably saw, an increase in popularity, even starting more like 10 years ago or something. But so I don't know if people are able to learn that much younger, but I think once they get to university age, that's a language coming up. Korean, I've heard about. And I really wouldn't know what other what other languages are popular. I mean, I would say East Asian languages. So other than Korean, Japanese, and of course, Mandarin has had this a lot of interest. I haven't seen it a lot, maybe in my region as much, maybe people in other parts of the US, but that doesn't mean that it's not that people aren't learning it. So yeah.
Right, that's interesting. And what about Romanian? How did you get to learn Romanian? What sparked your interest in Romanian?
Yeah, that took it took a while to get there. It was a meandering route, but from one side there was an interest because I was studying linguistics. I had a good base with 3 different Romance languages: French, Spanish, Italian, and so I had some awareness of it. One thing was that I really liked to listen to, that I started out just in my interpreting days for listening practice, Radio France Internationale, RFI. They have a Romanian language section. So this, access broadcasts on the internet for news. I would listen to the news broadcast in French, and then I would listen to it in Romanian, and just started to get a feel for the, musicality and sounds of the language. But then I was able to start picking out words and just gain more curiosity. And, I thought I had a much better grasp of Romanian than I really did at that point. Just, now I'm more aware that because it was a news source, because it's something, based in a Francophone country, there are going to be a certain amount of more Latin vocabulary in the language, and also, especially radio journalists have a sort of very practiced diction. So these are like ideal conditions. So it wasn't until 10 years ago, 2015, that I went to Romania for the first time, and realized I didn't really couldn't function in the language as much as I thought I could. But that's all to say that French definitely became my window into Romanian. I even had a professor at my university in my undergraduate degree in Colorado who he was French, but he had taught in Cluj. So he gave me a textbook for Francophones, French speakers, to learn Romanian. And so it was much quicker for me to pick certain things up because I was accessing Romanian directly through French rather than routing to English. So because I just had a better grasp for French at that time. I had been speaking it for many years. So I accessed. So I really looked at Romanian through this lens of French borrowings and that sort of a thing. My first visit to Romania, where I used English most of the time. The people I was able to stay with and meet, and I was first in Timișoara, then Arad, then went to Bucharest for a little bit. I just really felt at home in a way, a little more relaxed and more welcomed, and a little more comfortable just you know, from the get-go, from the start in Romania than I had been comparatively in my experiences in France and in Italy, places where I knew the language well, but I didn't always have a person-to-person connection that was as strong, you know. So I really wanted to know more. I wanted to be able to communicate more. I wanted to be able to travel more around Romania. I loved the experience of taking the train between, I went from Arad to Bucharest. So that 11 hours, you know, across the whole country, it's amazing. And I was able to, when I was living in Bucharest last year, you know, take a lot of train journeys and see a lot of the country. And it just was so fascinating.
I love that. And that's how we initially met. I was so curious who, you know, is this person from the US who learns, you know, the Romanian language so, you know, avidly, and not only studying the Romanian language, but also focusing your research on the 19th and 20th century literature, which I have to say is not it's not a very common research theme, and it's so exciting when someone focuses on it. And it's great that more and more people know nowadays that Romanian is a Latin language, so it is not a Slavic language, that it is actually a, you know, the first cousin, if we want to name it that way, the first cousin to Vulgar Latin. So I think that's really, really interesting. And you know, going back to your research, so your research focuses on Romanian Francophone writers. What drew you to this specific literary niche? And was there a particular book or author that initially made you fall in love with this topic?
Yes. Or there was a particular author. I'll get to that though. So I think just having studied French for a long time, you become aware of the International Organization of Francophonie. I had seen that Romania was a member country, and that really just made me curious. I had this question lingering in my head from many years ago of how is Romania a Francophone country, just knowing that it wasn't necessarily part of the French imperial colonial space. So, you know, how did French language have an importance? But that really was just the start, because, you know, Romania became a Francophone country, let's say in the 1950s. And I think the most interesting and most important parts of French language in its history are all before that. There's this other situation where when I was visiting Timișoara, that first trip in Romania, a friend told me about Mircea Eliade and really sang his praises. I was really interested in this famous Romanian intellectual. So I bought a book of his in Romanian, thinking, okay, I'm going to read in the original, or this will help me learn Romanian. You know, just like I like to get books in other languages. It's just a puzzle to slowly decode things, you know, slowly start to learn. And then I opened to the title page and it said, tradus din franceză, so translated from the French. So I'm like, okay, how did this major Romanian intellectual, why was he writing in French? So there was this other question that came up, was Mircea Eliade a Francophone writer? Yes and no. He was a Francophone. He had a high command of French. He was a writer, but and you know, he used French as a broader language of circulation for his in Romanian științific, his scientific works, his nonfiction, his research on history of religions. But, you know, his other writing, his fiction in Romanian, was a whole different body of things that I didn't know about. So then I was fascinated by him, but then I sort of had to rule him out. But in that journey of like, okay, what's this story with French and Mircea Eliade? I was able to discover so many more people, and this very interesting sort of 200-year-long, or I would say it continues to this day, connection between the cities of Bucharest and Paris. And sort of, you know, there's this transit of people, absolutely a transit of ideas, this exchange. And so I was fascinated by other authors, and I started to just try to learn about their journey. So we have one of the big ones, which is known in the French-speaking space, Émile Cioran, his cahiers, right? Cahier. So I started to get interested in Cioran, and then I discovered a lot of other writers, people who had been between. I have another one right here, Monica Lovinescu. This is also her journal, La Apa Babilonului. So I started to just get interested in the biographies, learn about the people, and then in the literature space, just sort of haphazardly, I already came here to Austin, Texas. I applied to the PhD program here, knowing that there was also a doctoral program in Romance linguistics. So I wanted to do literature, also linguistics, combine these languages. And I come to find out that in this archive in the middle of Texas at this university is the second largest collection of Marta Bibescu's papers. And she was a Romanian-born Francophone writer. She was born in Romania in the Bucharest in the 1880s, and she died in Paris in the 1970s. And that opened up this whole other world, because so much of what people talk about in present day about Romania is grounded in the communist period, and there's a whole period before that, and learning about the history of the urbanization and development of Bucharest, and sort of the coming out of the two provinces coming out of the Ottoman Empire, the story of Romania, joining Transylvania. There were so many things that just fascinating me. Sorry, I'm deviating, but it was, for a country that had so many of these influences, why was French important? And I was able to really trace that, take that a long way. And so I think it continues today. There's this connection. I'll just cite one more book that I like. It definitely didn't start my fascination, but is by Annie Lulu. It's called La Mer Noire dans les Grands Lacs, the Black Sea in the Great Lakes. She has a Romanian mother and a Congolese father. She was born in Iași, but grew up in France. And so even though this is part of French literature, it was published in 2021, I think it still speaks to this tradition of depicting the Romanian experience in French, and sort of this special lens on the foreigner's experience in France. I think Romanians have a different perspective on that. And there was a huge contribution to the development of literature. If we think about surrealists, or go back to Dada, Tristan Tzara, and that sort of a thing. There's all sorts of cross-pollination in the artistic movements, and so I don't think people see French today as an important language for Romania. It's definitely English that's taken that same role, but it had this historical importance. And I think looking at how French was used can also inform us how Romania operates as a multilingual country in multilingual paradigms, what's happening with English today. So I think it all interconnects sort of Romania's relationship with always another language. There's always Romanian present, but there are different minority languages, different major or outside languages having an impact. And I think it's really fascinating and impressive how the country over time just deals with that. Yeah.
Absolutely, and it's so interesting. You started to learn Romanian through that route. Absolutely, the francophone path, let's say, has always been very important for Romania. I have, that we share the same, passion, and for French, I've studied French since I was very little, and the francophone, let's say, events were much bigger than the English or British ones, right, or the American ones. So from an academic point of view, of course, English was always the preferred language, at least, in my age group. However, before, during the communism, French was actually taught along Russian. So it was, squeezed in there. Well, hoping nobody would pay attention. And we always had such strong roots with and connections with France. Not to mention that, from a language point of view, first of all, yes, Romanian is a Latin language, and we are sharing these roots with Vulgar Latin. So we are, let's say, first cousins. But also, what people probably don't know is that towards the end of the 19th century, the Romanian language, was, written in Cyrillic, so Russian characters. It was very much Russianized because of all the, of the Russian influence, but also because of all the texts, that came from religious literature, so to say. So at the end of the 19th century, all the, Romanian elite, they decided together that it's time to bring Romanian to its Latin roots. So we borrowed, literally from the dictionary, we borrowed those, words back from French and Italian. So 60% of the vocabulary was completely re-Latinized, and it was rewritten. And that's when we've taken the decision in, I think, 1885 or something like that. We've taken the decision to, write, once again with Latin characters, as we always had. And that is the Romanian that is spoken today, and it's a great thing to know, and that explains also, why we're so close to France until today. I think we share a lot of commonalities. And I just wanted to say, first of all, Eliade is my favorite writer of all time. So all his essays and all his fictional. All his fictional characters, his fiction books, and I think that's really, really interesting. And you're right, we had such a flourishing culture and literature before the communists. So that, I think, really, has taken us a little bit aback. But I think in 30 years, Romania has probably went back to how it was before. And Bucharest is such an amazing city to have lived in, because it has all these architecture from both eras, right? So how did you find Bucharest? What did you think about its unique architecture? Because Bucharest is pretty unique, right? So compared to other European capitals.
Yeah, that's one of the things that drew me to Bucharest was the architecture and sort of this just visual mark of the Bucharest as a palimpsest. I'm not going to claim this term, but as something that layers over time. There's I've read this by another academic. I wish I could remember what their name was, but that Bucharest really carries a mark in the built environment of these different cultural influences and of different pieces of history. And so that was really fascinating to me to see how certain planning models were taken from Paris in the 19th century, and then to see, of course, these blocurile, the apartment buildings, as we say in American English, whatever, blocks of flats, I think, in British English, that were from the communist era. It was interesting to see that juxtaposition and sort of the mark over time. So I was living in the Dealul Mitropolie, so the Metropolitan Hill neighborhood, where in Bucharest, which is a very central neighborhood, but it's where the theology faculty is for the university, and also just a lot of churches. So I had this interesting mix of textures and just food for the senses, I would say, where I would wake up at 7 in the morning to the church bells, and then I could go and walk out just 5 minutes, and I would be at why am I forgetting it? Oh, Bucharest, Piazza. oh God, why am I forgetting the name of this? It's right on the axis toward Palatul Parlamentului. No, it's not Piazza Republici, it's
Piazza Unirii.
Piazza Unirii, exactly. Okay, so yeah, so I could go. So you go out to Piazza Unirii, and you're at this this axis in the stage of planning from you know, the mind of the communist grand works and things like that. And you know, I think that it really shaped, or part of what really shaped that experience when I was able to live there with for 9 months is the Fulbright Commission took us on a tour of the Palace of Parliament, and so just to see the grandeur of things and sort of see the where Romania was at in the you know, 1970s ish and under Ceausescu and that sort of a thing, and then having this awareness too of the other layers much earlier than that, and then being able to walk, you know, beyond. So I could go from a space of very marked religious orthodoxy to this, you know, communist space, Piazza Unirii, then cross through right to the Lipscan area, to somewhere like Hanului Manuk's Inn, and you see this very Ottoman style Turkic structure, the Hans. So it was super fascinating to see the mark of time and everything, and be able to walk through that all. And then present day Bucharest, I think probably it's always been this way, is a very awesome multilingual laboratory. You know, as I walk through the streets, of course I hear English, I hear French, Italian, Spanish, Romanian, you know, just the languages that I can recognize in a way. But you know, it's so great to have that mixture of different nationalities. And as a Romanian learner, Bucharest specifically almost comes to my detriment because so much of the exchanges happen in English, and that's sort of this international currency. But I've been able to, you know, have enough experiences to compare it in Iași and Timișoara, Galați, Constanța to, you know, even that out. So yeah, Bucharest is a very special place to just wander around, you know, as to walk around amazing things. Also, aside from the built environment, the vegetation, the parks. You know, I lived near Parcul Carol. I took walks there a lot. I think just having a lot of these old big trees in the neighborhoods, it makes for a special charm. Yeah.
Sure, that's what I like also about Bucharest. Obviously, the architecture, the mixed architecture, but also indeed the vegetation, the parks. They've kept them in their original state, so that is really, really amazing. What surprised you the most about Romanian culture or daily life?
So what surprised me, or I would say maybe more impressed me, it's Romanians' ability to make their way through chaotic situations, or maybe what I might see as an outsider, it looks like chaos. You know, just keeping a sense of humor or a certain lightness, you know, like while you're perhaps narrowly dodging different obstacles. So I can think of two terms in Romanian that capture this in a way. So there's an expression, a face haz de necaz. So to make fun, to make light out of troubles or problems, to be able to turn something bad into something good, or something at least you can laugh at. And then there's the term șmecher, and the verb that comes from it, a șmecheri. So like, you know, it means to be clever and have this sort of cunning. And so it can be taken in either a positive or negative way. Sometimes it means to outsmart someone and, you know, kind of play them, on them. But I think of it, or, you know, I think that positive light of it, to be able to make your way through. And, you know, I mean, this is a translation challenge in itself. How do we translate a șmecheri? But yeah, there's a certain like cleverness, and it's the expression I would use in idiomatic English is like rolling with the punches. And you know, not that people are always fighting, you know, obstacles coming their way, but I think there's a way to stay light with things, and to keep a sense of amusement even in situations where there are crowds of people and everything. Things that definitely overwhelmed me as someone from not a huge city in the US. You know, I'm not a New Yorker, and I feel like I sort of needed that New Yorker sensibility in Bucharest. But, yeah.
Those are great examples. And you're right. If I think of, you know, Romanians out of, you know, what differentiates us from other similar people, Eastern European, but also Balkan, because we have obviously this Balkan heritage, it's for sure the ability to adapt to any situation in life. And I think this also explains why we have one of the largest diaspora of all the countries nearby. That people, you know, go, and I think they can make a living anywhere they go. So probably something in our spirit. Who knows?
Yes, it's a high adaptability. I think that speaks to the embracing different languages and, you know, different cultures, and then also, yeah, this being able to go out there and diasporate. Yeah.
Right, diasporate or hustling, right, as you would call it.
Yes, hustling. I forget.
That's such a funny term, isn't it?
Yeah, schmeckery and like having that's a good way, having a hustle, and being scrappy, like knowing just how to make, you know how to make your way through things.
Sure, learn by doing. So Keith, if you could translate any book from Romanian into English, old or new, what would it be and why?
So this one I have actually started trying my hand at translating. Adrian Schiop's Soldații, poveste din Ferentar. So soldiers, a tale from Ferentar. So what I like about this is it's showing is from 2012, so contemporary. It's showing a cross section of Bucharest that's just interesting, and so it's a doctoral student who's from I believe Transylvania, the character, and Ferentar is a neighborhood of Bucharest. So he's doing his studies in Bucharest and confronting all different types of characters, but people from the Rom community as well. And I think it's just an interesting show of the different aspects of Bucharest. And I really want to bring that across in the body of English language literature. And if I were to have a second choice, there's this collection I was able to attend the book launch of, Dragostea Când te doare. So I would honestly translate anything in this book, but there's one short story called Desenul, the drawing, by Andrei Panțu, and that again just it has like a lot of English mixed in, so that would be an interesting thing to treat in translation, whether to call that out if I'm translating into English. But I think it just shows this this globalized, hyper-real modern Bucharest, and that's what really excites me. And yeah, I have to say, I have to give a nod to a translation that I really appreciate and really aspire to. Something that I've just been reading in the past few days is Sean Cotter's translation of Mataiu Carajale's Crai de Curtea Veche, The Rakes of the Old Court. That's someone, Carajale, the son, he was someone who really experimented in literature, and so to find a way to bring that into English, and sort of it makes a window into the original text for me, because it's a very difficult type of Romanian that he writes with, but you know, some of the English sentences that come out of it are just absolutely beautiful, stunning, you know. Uluitor, uluitoare.
I love that. Yeah, and Sean Cotter is also Mircea Cărtărescu's translator, right? So he translated all his books into English, and he's also teaching, right, at the University of Dallas. I'm actually reading a book by him translated into Romanian about translation during communism, and how the Romanian writers, being, you know, obviously, you know, banished from publishing their books, they resorted to translation as literary endeavor. So that is a really interesting book I recommend too. And speaking of translating from the Romanian language, there is a program, right, that the Romanian government funds. So I think every year we offer 5 scholarships for, translators worldwide who love to translate books, right, from Romanian into other languages such as English. So I'll drop that link in the video description for anyone. And as always, Keith, I always share those announcements with you, right? I'm like, Keith, here it is, your opportunity to translate books and get some funding for it. And of course, get them published, which is amazing.
Absolutely. Yes. I think all the special aspects of Romanian literature could come if they could be brought across to an English-speaking readership. It's a really special thing. Yeah.
Exactly, especially these niche authors who are not known in other countries or abroad. And going back to the University of Dallas, for aspiring literary translators, when we had a pre-chat, you told me that there is an interesting program that the University of Dallas offers. Can you tell us more about this, and also maybe about other international study opportunities for the Romanian students?
Yes, absolutely. So it's the University of Texas at Dallas. So there's the Literary Translation Center, and Sean Cotter, as I mentioned, who has translated some big names in Romanian literature like Mircea Cărtărescu. He's one of the people in this program, and I think he just expressed to me that if the word got out to more Romanians who or the awareness, there are some funding opportunities available too. So I think there's been a change in visa requirements and things, so it might be easier perhaps for Romanians to come to the US, but I can't comment on that. I'm not in the diplomatic community or anything, but I think it's definitely something to explore. I think I left you the link. We don't per se have, so I'm at the University of Texas at Austin. We're about 3 hours away, so it's one larger university system, but at my university, we don't really have a translation program. A lot of us in comparative literature are interested in it, but I think what is available there at UT Dallas would be really interesting for people who want to come to the US from other places, or who are already in the US and have another language, and have a space, in a very international city like Dallas is, to hone that skill of translation. And I think it has something that I haven't seen in a lot of programs. If you're wanting to do something beyond like a master's degree, there is actually a PhD, a doctoral degree, where a literary translation can be part of your like a sort of a replacement for a dissertation, I think. So work of translation. So I think that's maybe a program I wish I had started in, because it would be much more fun to produce a translation than writing a dissertation necessarily. So I wanted to mention that. And then international opportunities, I have to give a plug to the Fulbright organization, which is a department, or sorry, it's an entity within the U.S. Department of State that aims at promoting international exchanges. So there are many bilateral agreements and commissions. There is one between the U.S. and Romania. So there's a Fulbright Commission in Romania, a Romanian-American Fulbright Commission. That's what I was able to benefit from funding as an American to go to Romania, but also Romanians can apply to come to the U.S. And I see a lot of people interested in that. I was able to have really fascinating discussions. There are actually group workshops in Romanian to English translation in some classes at the University of Bucharest, and I was able to meet a lot of undergraduate students in Timișoara and Galați in the past year, and in Bucharest, who I think are really interested in maybe, exploring. And so I think they should take advantage of those opportunities. Yeah. Or just explore them at least. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. The Romanian universities have great fellowships, I would say, with the American universities. I think Fulbright is probably the equivalent of Erasmus in Europe.
So I'm just speaking to things that are sort of linked to the US. Of course, if you're a European Union citizen, Erasmus and Erasmus Mundus are great things. I wish that we had access to it as Americans as well. Yeah.
It was just to say that it is quite accessible, right? Because I think the misconception when Romanian students think about Fulbright, they think about something that is inaccessible. There are only like limited states. No, I think it's really from what I heard from other people, it is very accessible, and it is similar to the Erasmus program. So definitely worth checking out. Keith, so we briefly touched upon your experience in localization in the introduction. You've worked in localization, translation, language instruction, and research. Out of all these experiences, which one has shaped you the most, and why?
That's really hard to say, to just pick one that shaped me the most, but maybe translation, I think, and studying translation and interpretation. I think that was sort of my first orientation, and I think it's taught me to follow language very closely. I think, translators do sort of one of the closest readings of texts, but interpreters also are following speech very closely. And so, even doing something like transcription, we see, exactly how complicated it can be, or how many things we can fit into such a short span of time in speech, and all the possibilities that there are with translation, with sort of what the world of meaning is in the source language, and how to convert that to a world of meaning in the target language, and who you expect to be the reader, or all those sort of questions. I think those have always fascinated me, and they make me look at communication even within one language, like monolingual English communication, for example, in a different way, to just be aware that there are many ways to say the same thing, or even, are you saying exactly the same thing? There are all these shades of nuance, and also just appreciating the work that all the people who work between languages, who are, mediators between different languages, appreciating all that they do. So I would say translation really has shaped me the most.
Amazing. Yeah, and what do you think about how the translation work has evolved over time? Because working in localization, you probably saw post-editing at its beginning. Now it's slowly beginning to eat out almost all the translation orders that we get now. It's of course maybe in the literary field less, right? Because you need to be a bit more creative. And we haven't gotten that far in machine translation to be that accurate, that sharp, that creative. How do you feel translation has evolved over time?
Yeah, so from the perspective of the localization industry, I definitely wasn't working with literary texts at all. I was in the life sciences side of things, and less a translator and more of, in the project management language strategy side of things. And yeah, I definitely was able to witness a lot of trying to transfer over to machine translation and post edit rather than, in that way, I witnessed also the reaching out to translators, linguists, about changing their rates and doing those sorts of things, and when things went well and when they didn't, and which languages worked with machine translation and which didn't. At that time, I know we had there were some troubles with producing finite dictionaries for agglutinative languages like Kazakh and Hungarian, where you can combine words to an infinite degree. So a dictionary would not really work in the same way as So, I think there was a need for the technology to understand the diversity of different languages at the time. And I can't say what the situation is now. Last time I was working in localization was 2018. But I think that I think that is one of the things I saw was a switch to more machine translation and I don't know what else. Yeah, I'm not sure what other changes there were, but the more that things are technologized and on the internet, and people are working in coding and on the software side of things, the build, I think there's just always more of a need for there to be communication with people who work in languages. So running projects on linguistic testing, I used to do that. So making sure that the user experience is designed correctly. Like I see websites all the time with unmapped translation that just they don't work. So I think I think that there just needs to be more attention paid to those things, and a lot of companies choose to take the easy way out, and it produces bad translations. So yeah, I think I really appreciate a more rigorous process in that sense if you're running software, to have linguistic testers work with it beyond just translation, because there's so many other processes between the software build, the converting one language to another, and then the end user experience that need to be taken into account when it comes to localization.
Yeah, you're spot on, Keith. I think with the generative AI introduction, the linguist role has gotten more technical, right? So we talk about parametering these large language models. So a lot of the output of the revision that the translators need to do nowadays is mostly machine translated, mostly AI translated. So more difficult to tell what the source term was. But it is working really well for languages where you have a big corpus of data. So where, for instance, English-French is one of those combinations, and it works less well with a language such as Romanian because, the database, right, is simply not there. So statistically, the machine is less inclined to give you the perfect answer. So that's where we are. And speaking about interpreting, so you started out as an interpreter, right? How do you think the role of interpreters has evolved over time? Have you noticed any major shifts in how interpreting is perceived or practiced today in the US?
Yeah, I think I've seen a shift in how I perceive interpreting, and it's been I've brought it from a more international scope to seeing the day-to-day needs in the US. So when I started out, so I'll talk less about actually doing interpreting than and more about just having studied interpreting, and then and I wouldn't say that I've done it as paid work, but I find myself in situations mediating between people where it comes up a lot just over my life. But anyways, when I first sought out being an interpreter when I was finishing high school, thinking about university studies, I held it on a pedestal. I had very high ambitions. There was one specific profile, and that was the United Nations conference interpreter, who has these conditions of they're either working in a booth or at high-level meetings, and it's just very controlled and ideal conditions. But then just sort of recognizing that how interpreting happens in the real world and gaining a lot more respect for public service interpreting, is realizing that it's a lot more messy, where you don't have those controlled conditions. So you and I were talking about, at first I was thinking that the US didn't have the same sort of structures in place as the UK for public service interpreting. It's just that it's not necessarily a diploma, but I would say, come to find out, I just looked up the program that I studied in at a community college in Colorado, and that's now housed under the certificate in translation interpretation is housed under public service. So I'm realizing that that's exactly what I did. Putting interpreters into the workforce in the most common settings are the courts and the medical settings, or these at least need specialized knowledge for judicial and medical interpreters. I think that just seeing the need for that, and then seeing where people are underserved that need those language services, where in medical appointments where it's someone's child interpreting for them because it's a rare language, or there's not over the phone interpreting coming up. I think it's I think we need it all the more there, because there are hundreds of interpreters who can fill those positions in the UN and EU and things like that, and they probably spend a lot of their lives doing other types of maybe translation or community interpreting. But I think just seeing where the needs are more in the communities, and appreciating people that have to work in noisy courtrooms or just less than ideal conditions that we don't always get. It's interesting, and I have no idea how people are doing it over Zoom, because the interpreter group that we first met in, Daniela, I was part of the French English practice group, and just figuring out the technology of audio channels is something that that puzzled me. So I think just in the post-pandemic, or just the very technologized world, I did my interpretation certificate in 2010, so it's already been 15 years. There are a lot more things to adapt to in that way, but that broadens your international reach. I think the pandemic and time at home allowed us all to, if we wanted to really tap into international markets. Like I work with mainly European languages, quote unquote. I'll call French an international language. It's not just European. But not being in Europe, I really cherish the time when I can connect digitally with people to sort of work with those things. So that's how it's changed, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. There are a lot of things to unpack there. And you and I, we talked about the US setup. I think it's really similar to the UK one when it comes to community interpreting, public, interpreting, court interpreting, medical interpreting, where there's a huge need and very little interpreters or few interpreters available out there, which I can only imagine in the US is 100% more happening much more. And just the recognition of the profession itself, right? Because not all the interpreters have this what we call the DPSI, the diploma in public service interpreting. Agencies are working with anyone they can get their hands on, because there's such a huge need for interpreters. And I wanted to ask you, do you think that today in the US, immigrants or, other, people coming from different cultural backgrounds receive enough linguistic support?
The short answer is no. I don't think they do. And something I was just thinking of as you were speaking was the sort of enigmatic thing is that a lot more support is readily provided for sign language interpretation here. Or I don't know about more support, but I think people are more readily accept that, and it comes to their awareness that this is an accessibility issue to allow someone to communicate. who uses a sign language, and it should be thought of the same way for a spoken language, that it is your ability to access public services, is blocked by that not understanding the language. And so this is just, it should be thought of as a basic right. Language justice is a big thing talked about in the US. And I think we need a broader shift in the mentality toward what the multilingual landscape really is in this country, and how that affects, I'll use a word that's now sort of being banned in the US, equity, but equitable services being provided, across different multilingual landscapes. I think, there's a climate of villainizing immigrants, and also just like a broader, longer history of sort of English language hegemony, and sort of the privileging of the English monolingual's perspective, and a force to assimilation, that people don't really realize the struggles that someone has when they're trying to communicate or need communication facilitated in a second, third language, because a lot of people have never tried to learn a second language or had to, be in that situation. So I think just what needs to change in some ways the most, which is the hardest because it's sort of conceptual, is empathy. Sort of empathy toward just different people's situations, and that their person, as someone that doesn't speak your language, is a person with thoughts just like you, or they need to seek these services. And so I think that's an issue, and sort of something that goes along with the villainizing is sort of the blocking access, the initial sort of in some ways dehumanizing. One of the volunteer translation projects I first took on when I moved to Texas was translating letters where asylum seekers, mostly from Central and West Africa, were they were held in a detention center and writing to judges to receive that status of asylum, explaining their situations in their countries and things like that. So, they were only able to have a voice as people writing in French because I could, be in that small role for a very short time as a volunteer. I don't think that that's right or just at all. I think, that we really need to do more. Of course, it's always a question of funding and things like that. But I think, we can bring up our society from a very young age in a way where we can appreciate the linguistic diversity and sort of see, just opening your eyes to what's around you. I think what I was talking about with tapping into the Spanish speaking community around me, I think there are a lot of people who come from a similar background as me with just English speaking families that don't even notice that world around them. Like the only thing that has relevance is what happens in the English language. And there's a whole broader world out there. And even not within the broader world, we don't have to go outside of this country. Just in this country alone, we have so many languages, and that's an advantage. And we really need to respect that, and then have just more interpreter training programs to serve the community. I think where it is really where the funding goes and the training goes the most is to defense, army, military, this sort of a thing. And instead of, training people in Dari and Pashto to listen in on intelligence files, we need to have the grandmother down the street who only speaks Spanish able to, say, fill out a survey to get COVID assistance. That's something I came across in the past few years. It's just, a much bigger need, and we need a paradigm shift that, we don't need to know other people's languages just to have a military presence in their country.
You anticipated my next question. I wanted to ask if you think it's a question of funding or lack of interest, or is it the way that the system is set up? And you and I, we had a conversation that UK has a very, very similar setup where we don't provide language support from the beginning, right? From the moment when, we have immigrants coming to the country, right? From something as basic as offering them language classes, which in Germany, for instance, that is free of charge for anyone who moves to Germany and they don't know the language, because they, from one hand, it's an administrative type of support, because when you get hired, for instance, in Germany, they would require you to have a B1 or preferably B2 certificate in German, but the government would facilitate that, which in the UK doesn't happen. I mean, even in the Romanian community, it is really difficult to ask someone to speak English at a B1, B2 level where you don't provide that type of support, where language classes are just so, expensive, and sometimes they just mix people up with different levels, so you don't really get the support you need. So my question was, in the multicultural linguistic paradise that the US is, what seems to be the issue? Is it the funding, or maybe a lack of interest, or maybe the system is not set up in a way to absorb and support such a big, number of people who need this support? What do you think?
It's all of these things, yeah. But yeah, the system really not set up to provide that type of support. I think it's it's really just the onus goes on the individual. It becomes their responsibility to learn English and sometimes find work and housing and all of those things. So I think sort of something that's sort of affecting that is this idea of the American dream of people that come to the country with these ambitions that they'll just build their own life, and people need support. So I think it's a systematic thing, but also there's sort of a need to open our eyes to, like I've said, the linguistic landscape that is already there. I mean, we don't have a second official language, or I'm not even sure if English has been codified as the official language in the US, but all documentation is certainly circulated in English and Spanish. Like, this is already happening around us. And so sort of, securing the multilingual support at a higher level, I think it definitely comes from grassroots, from below, from the community level. That's always happening. But just an appreciation of that or a sympathy toward it at much higher levels of government. If there was something federal, or there's, like even going from state to state, we have different certifications for court interpreting, different certifications for medical interpreting. So to be qualified to work in certain places, it's sort of a hurdle to move around in the country. Anyways, but there are, like, as you say, the big issue is there are too few well-trained interpreters and translators to serve people. So
Exactly. So lots of opportunities. That's exactly what I was writing down as I was hearing you talk about these topics. So first of all, I think that, with AI, which I call elevated machine translation, there's a big opportunity to translate that massive amount of, text. It is not always available in all the languages. Even in the UK, the Romanian community is the second largest at the moment, and not all the text available on the government website, or the medical, the legal type of text. We can now use AI to translate it, or to even maybe get an affordable translation by working with these big localization companies. But also for interpreting, I think there is a massive opportunity for those listening who haven't yet passed their certification to use their language skills. Not all the translation agencies require these certifications because of the massive need It's the same, I believe, in the UK and in the US. So there's a huge opportunity with people, moving around from country to country. There's a huge opportunity for you to, start reaching out to these translation agencies if you have the language skills, and get, certified as you go. I think this is everybody started, and the need is there more now than ever.
Yeah, and I think it's great to have more. I don't know if they're officially short courses, but things like certificate programs. Something I did was 10 weeks, and it was a course in written translation, simultaneous interpretation, consecutive interpretation, and the business of translation interpretation. So something really just that can pivot people out into the environment, and it's a place to network too. I think things like that are great, so you don't have to follow a 2-year master's or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly. So I ask this question with every episode, Keith. So how do you see AI? Do you see AI as a tool that can help translators? AI, being as a creative partner. We had a chit chat before recording this episode, and I told you about the symposium that I joined, held by the Oxford University, and they've even used AI as a co-creative partner in translating, but also creating poetry, which was really fun and interesting. But how do you see AI? Do you see AI as a partner? Do you see AI as a no, taking away the human essence of translated work? What do you think? I mean, being in localization before, so seeing machine translation, and this is not new to us, right? I think we've been doing machine translation since the early 2000s. But how do you feel about the new generative conversational AI?
It's scary what it can do, AI. But no, I absolutely see the use for it in the more technical fields, where language is a little bit more stable. But something creative, I think, like literary translation. I've yet to, actually see examples where AI is used, so I can't speak on it from much experience. But sort of theoretically, I think it takes out that human creativity. But the term you use, I think, is really making me think about it differently. A creative partner. Yeah, I think that you would have to see the generative AI tool as a secondary voice there, and so for literary translation or for something like poetry, I really don't know, because I think something I said earlier, that translation is an act of close reading. I think what I appreciate about literary translation is it is a reading. It's a presentation of a reading of the original text. So the translator is, as much as they should be neutral or whatever, they do have to, have some interpretation of the text and present the text as a literary text in the target language. So that has all sorts of conventions and things like that. But in that sense, if a translator or literary translator were working on a really large series or something, and they want to do something to maintain consistency, build a corpus, and work with, I've worked with translation memories. I think those are really helpful for, things like that, where, you need a character or a certain reference to stay consistent. That's really more about terminology. But AI that can produce full phrases and sentences, that I'm not sure about, but as you said before, too, it really depends on how big the corpus is. As we're feeding corpora, and with quality content too, because the detriment with a lot of Romanian into English. Things is, I'm not sure, how many corpora are fed by this, but we get a lot of lower quality English translations already coming out that don't have really a natural sounding English because of just a few tweaks you need to make in the conversion between languages. But yeah, so I think things could come out a little clunky, but it's a lot worse with other language pairings as well. But I would love to see what the possibilities are. I know that it's something that I have to accept because I'm teaching students at the university level, so they've come up in a way where they really work with these things a lot to a degree that I don't even know. But AI, it's something that we can't deny the presence of. So I think it's going to be a necessary way to also interact with a slightly younger generation. And I wonder, the people who are doing university studies, maybe in their early 20s in translation interpreting, how they're approaching this issue.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the conversational AI works well, exactly how it's designed to work as a partner. So it can give you some creative ideas where you are stuck, or where you would go the extra mile, and you can actually test how creative it can get. So in a partnership, I think it's interesting. I haven't tested it myself. I think it can be a great partner when you know what to ask, and can come back with some suggestions that you maybe haven't thought of.
Yeah, I'm absolutely in support of that. I think that's sort of just a different iteration of the translation process anyhow. Like with literary translation, there's a lot of peer review, or it's always helpful when you can be in a community with people and get opinions. So if you have an AI generating suggestions, say, or you take them as suggestions, like, I think it's all about working smartly with it. So looking at a machine translation or an AI generated thing as, this is one possibility. Now let's see, how I, with my skills and experience in human language, really can adapt this to be more fitting. Like, is it going to work? Is it not? Just having that judgment process, I think that that's what we still need to sort of vet the AI. So it could really speed things up, where you're like, okay, this is exactly it. Or getting having transference for like idiomatic expressions or things like that. That would be great. Yeah.
Absolutely. We touched upon so many interesting topics, Keith. What's next for you? Any exciting research, translation projects, or personal goals you're working on?
Well, I really just want to finish my dissertation. I've been working at this PhD for 5 years or so. Yeah, if I count just the time after my master's, but if I lump all grad school together, it's been 7 years. So I would like to just sort of, have the outcome of my research time in Romania and that just come to a conclusion. So yeah, I would say like what I'm really into with the research right now, I mentioned Cai de Curtea Veche, so looking into this text, Breaks of the Old Court, and sort of all ways that I can explore Bucharest as it's depicted in the literary landscape, and sort of, that sort of a thing. And then I would really like to work up more literary translations from Romanian to English, even if it's just an exercise for fun. I like to do peer workshop groups with into English translators. We don't know each other's source languages oftentimes, and so just to see how the final text reads, it's really helpful. There's a great community around locally here in Austin. And the other thing, I've never done learning languages. So my next language is Urdu. I have some notions and learned to read the script a while ago. I've been to Pakistan before. I'm hoping to go again sometime in the near future and to have language skills to communicate more. I think that's what what my journey with Romanian was like very much. It was going to the country, having some notion of the language, but not really getting to being able to access life that way. And then so being so determined to learn enough of the language to use it. So that's really what I would like to do with Urdu, to go to Pakistan, maybe possibly India someday, or, you know, these languages are spoken in so many other countries. So yeah, so I think just learning more languages and engaging with the ones that I know, it's always, you know, so fun. Yeah.
Wow, Urdu. That must be so exciting. That must be such an interesting language to learn. Is it difficult? Have you started already to learn a few?
Yeah, well, so I have, you know, people around me speaking it. So there are certain things that I can pick up from the spoken language. And because it's an Indo-European language, Urdu and Hindi are sort of, they can be looked at as one continuum. But so they're more related to like some of these European languages, or at least, you know, Romance languages, Germanic languages, than something like Arabic or something. So there are some really interesting connections from time to time that I see, even between Romanian and Urdu, like old Turkish influences on Romanian, that you'll get a word like, oh God, what is one? A word I was coming across, it's definitely a Turkish word in Romanian, but in Romanian poetry, Bolintinianu was talking about shalvar, a type of pants. And those are definitely, you know, something known in the Urdu-speaking world. So it presents a lot of surprising connections. And then when I look back at people like Mircea Eliade, the more I'm reading Emil Cioran's journal, I'm seeing his fascination with the Vedas and Indian philosophy, and how Mircea Eliade was very into, or he did his thesis on yoga. So there's this connection sometimes between Romania and South Asia that is fascinating. You know, that I'm looking forward to digging up more little gems from. Yeah.
It is. Indeed, Keith, this has been an absolute pleasure. From your, you know, passion for the Romanian language to your particular interest in the 19th and 20th century literature, Romanian literature, Francophone literature, to these, you know, small connections that you can make between words in Romanian and different cultural heritages. The conversation has flown really nicely. Thank you so much for the episode today. I will add all your links in the video description, as well as all the books that you have referenced. I will definitely add the literary programs that we mentioned, the interpreting certifications also for those in the US listening to us who are interested in pursuing these qualifications. Anything you want to add?
I would say to anyone who's aspiring towards, you know, working with languages or learning them, don't let anything hold you back if they're not present in your environment. The internet can bring the world to us. And so, you know, me as an example from a part of the US that doesn't always get, you know, exposure to global cultures like your Los Angeles and New York type of places, I still have that curiosity. And so follow your curiosity, and there's an unlimited amount of outcomes for where it can take you in the world. So I think a curiosity for other cultures and languages can go really far, and just really try to forge those connections however you can, if it's digital or in person. Yeah.
Amazing. What a great way to end this episode. Keith, thank you so much once again for making the time for us today. And for those of you listening, please don't forget to subscribe so that you can get the alerts for the next episodes. And thank you so much for listening today.
Thank you. Mulțumesc din suflet.